Luke wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand as he leaned against the worn wooden fence of the ranch. The late afternoon sun burned low on the horizon, casting long, golden shadows across the dusty fields. The smell of hay, leather, and the faint tang of livestock filled the air. He had been at the ranch since sunrise, tending the cattle, mending fences, and riding the rough terrain that seemed endless. Every muscle in his body ached, and his chest felt heavier than usual. Luke had been ignoring the fatigue for weeks, telling himself he could handle it, as he always did. But today was different. He had pushed himself harder than ever, and the lingering pain in his ribs and the persistent cough in his throat made it clear he could not simply brush it off. Luke was a man who had faced hardships all his life. Growing up on the open plains, he learned early that life was about survival, about being tough and self-reliant. Help was for others, not for him. And yet, as he leaned against the fence, he realized that survival was no longer enough. He needed someone who could care for him. The town was small, a cluster of dusty streets and wooden buildings surrounded by endless prairie. Word traveled quickly here, and Luke knew he couldn't ask just anyone for help. That's when Clara came to mind. Clara had been in the town for as long as anyone could remember. People often called her the giant bride, though it was never meant unkindly. She was taller than most women, strong, and her presence was commanding. Yet, for all her size, she had a gentle heart. She cared for the townsfolk, not with judgment, but with kindness. She healed wounds, delivered babies, and helped those who struggled with illness. Some said she was intimidating, but Luke remembered hearing about how tender her touch was, how carefully she treated even the smallest child. Luke hesitated, staring out at the horizon where the sun was sinking behind the hills. Pride had always been his shield, and admitting weakness felt like stepping into unknown territory. But he knew he couldn't go on like this. The cough racked his chest again, sharp and exhausting, and he knew that ignoring it would only make things worse. With a deep, uneven breath, he swung himself onto his horse and started the slow ride toward Clara's cabin. Clara's cabin was at the edge of the town, near the trees where the prairie met the forest. The cabin was simple but sturdy, built from weathered logs, with a small garden out front. Smoke curled from the chimney, signaling that someone was home. As Luke approached, he could see Clara moving around inside, her long frame bending gracefully as she carried bundles of herbs and supplies. She had noticed him through the window and turned, her eyes widening slightly in recognition. "Luke," she called, her voice calm and welcoming. "You're out late." Luke nodded, tipping his hat as he dismounted. "Evening, Clara," he said, his voice rough from the persistent cough. I need your help." Clara's expression softened, and she stepped outside, brushing her hands on her apron. "Of course," she said. "Come in. You don't need to wait here in the cold." John creases. Clara's expression. Inside, the cabin smelled of herbs, dried flowers, and warm bread. Luke took in the familiar comfort of the place, a sense of relief washing over him. He had always admired Clara from afar, not just for her strength, but for the warmth she carried. Her eyes, bright and steady, seemed to see right through him, not in a judgmental way, but as if she could see his exhaustion and his pride laid bare. Clara led him to a sturdy chair near the hearth and gestured for him to sit. "Tell me what's wrong," she said softly. Luke hesitated, struggling to find the words. He had spent so long taking care of himself, rarely admitting that he needed anyone. But the weight in his chest, the fatigue that seeped into every bone, made him speak honestly for the first time in years. I've been pushing myself too hard," he admitted, his voice breaking slightly. "Working the ranch, riding the cattle. I thought I could manage. But lately, I just can't." Clara nodded, understanding without interrupting. She moved to a small cupboard and brought out a jar of herbal tea. The aroma of chamomile and honey filled the air, soothing and gentle. She poured the tea into a cup and handed it to him. Luke took it, grateful for the warmth that seeped into his hands. "You don't have to do this alone, Luke," Clara said, her tone steady but kind. "You've carried so much for so long. It's okay to let someone help you." Luke looked down at the cup in his hands, thinking of all the nights he had spent alone, pretending to be fine. The realization that he could accept help without losing his strength was unfamiliar, almost frightening. And yet, the comfort of Clara's presence, the calm assurance in her voice, made it possible. Over the next hour, Clara examined him carefully, asking questions about his cough, his fatigue, and the injuries he had sustained over the years. Luke answered honestly, surprised at how easy it was to speak to her. There was no judgment, no expectation, just care and attention. Clara prepared a warm compress for his chest, applied soothing ointments, and brewed more tea. She moved with gentle efficiency, her large hands surprisingly delicate as she tended to him. Luke felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, gratitude, and something deeper, a connection he had rarely experienced. He realized that this wasn't just about physical care. It was about trust, about allowing someone to see his vulnerability and still accept him fully. Clara, with her quiet strength and unwavering kindness, represented something he had been missing his entire life: a safe place to let his guard down. As the evening wore on, the cabin grew warmer, the fire crackling softly in the hearth. Luke, feeling the fatigue that had been gnawing at him all day, leaned back in the chair. Clara moved about, arranging blankets, fetching more tea, and keeping the atmosphere calm and comforting. Finally, Luke spoke again, his voice quieter this time. "Clara, I don't know if I've ever let anyone care for me like this," he admitted. "It's different. Good different. But I've never been this open before." Clara paused, turning to him with a gentle smile. "That's why I'm here," she said simply. "You don't have to face everything alone. Sometimes, even the strongest people need help. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." Luke nodded slowly, the weight of pride and self-reliance lifting just slightly. For the first time in years, he felt understood, seen, and accepted not for what he could do, but for who he was. He realized that asking for help was not a defeat. It was the beginning of something new, something that might bring comfort and connection he had never allowed himself to feel. The sun had set completely by now, leaving the cabin bathed in the warm glow of the fire. Luke sipped his tea, feeling the warmth spread through him, and watched Clara move about with ease and care. He knew this was only the beginning of a bond that would change both their lives. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to breathe, to relax, and to hope that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to face life entirely on his own. And in that quiet, gentle cabin, under the soft light of the fire, a new chapter was quietly beginning, one of trust, care, and the kind of connection that could only come when two people, weary from life's struggles, allowed themselves to truly see one another. The night was calm outside Clara's cabin, with only the faint rustle of trees and the distant call of an owl breaking the silence. Inside, the fire crackled softly, filling the cabin with warmth. Luke had spent most of the evening sitting quietly, letting Clara tend to him. It was a strange feeling at first. He had been tense, unsure how to act while someone cared for him. But now, a quiet comfort had settled over him, and he realized he had not felt this safe or at ease in years. Clara moved about the small cabin with practiced ease, her presence both strong and gentle. She prepared a warm broth for Luke, the steam rising in delicate swirls. He watched her from the chair near the hearth, noticing the careful way she carried herself, how she seemed completely at peace in her own skin. There was no rush, no worry, just steady, purposeful movements. Luke found himself relaxing further, simply by watching her. "You need to eat," Clara said softly, placing the bowl in front of him. "It will help you regain some strength." Luke nodded, his hands slightly trembling as he picked up the spoon. He took a cautious sip, the warmth spreading through his chest, soothing the ache he had been carrying all day. "It's good," he said quietly, not wanting to admit how much he had missed this kind of care. Clara sat nearby, her eyes never leaving him. "You've been pushing yourself too hard," she said gently. "You can't keep going like this and expect to stay strong." Luke swallowed, feeling a mix of shame and relief. I didn't want to ask for help," he admitted. "I've always done things on my own. It's hard to let someone in." Clara nodded knowingly. "I understand," she said. "But even the strongest people need support sometimes. Caring for someone doesn't make them weak, it makes them human. And you're human, Luke." Her words settled over him like a soft blanket, comforting and familiar yet foreign at the same time. He had spent so many years hiding his struggles, pretending that he could handle everything alone. But here, in Clara's cabin, he felt the walls he had built around himself begin to crumble. After he finished the broth, Clara helped him to a more comfortable chair by the fire. She adjusted the blankets around him and applied a gentle compress to his chest, easing the soreness that had been lingering for days. Luke closed his eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the fire and the care of Clara surround him. It was a feeling he had rarely experienced, being cared for without any expectation, without any judgment. As the evening stretched on, Luke felt the tension in his body slowly ease. He began to talk, first hesitantly, about his life, his work on the ranch, and the endless days of labor that had left him worn and exhausted. Clara listened patiently, nodding and occasionally asking gentle questions. She never interrupted or rushed him, allowing him to share his story at his own pace. For the first time in a long while, Luke felt understood. Clara's presence was steady and reassuring, like a safe harbor after years of storms. He realized that he didn't have to carry everything on his own. Someone could help him, and it didn't make him less of a man. After a while, Clara spoke quietly. "Luke, you're stronger than you think," she said. "But strength isn't just about doing everything by yourself. It's also about knowing when to accept help, when to let someone be there for you." Luke nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. He wanted to tell her how much her kindness meant, but the words seemed too heavy to speak. Instead, he simply looked at her, letting his gratitude show in his eyes. Clara smiled gently, understanding without needing words. She moved to the small cabinet and brought out a bundle of warm herbs and oils, explaining that they would help soothe his muscles and ease the tension in his chest. As she applied the ointment, her hands were careful and deliberate, strong, but gentle. Luke marveled at the paradox: someone so powerful in appearance could be so tender in touch. The night grew deeper, and the firelight cast soft shadows on the walls of the cabin. Luke felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The ache in his chest wasn't just physical, it was emotional too, a weight he had carried alone for far too long. Clara's care was helping him heal in ways he hadn't realized he needed. At one point, Luke looked up at Clara, his voice barely above a whisper. "Clara, I've never let anyone see me like this," he admitted. "I've always been the one taking care of others, never the one being cared for. It feels strange, but good." Clara's eyes softened, and she placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "That's because you've been strong for so long," she said gently. "But everyone deserves to be cared for. Even cowboys like you." Her words made him smile faintly. A small, genuine expression of relief and connection. He realized that he didn't have to be perfect, didn't have to hide his weakness. Clara's presence made him feel accepted, seen, and valued for who he was, not just for what he could do. As the night wore on, they continued to talk quietly, sharing stories of their pasts. Luke spoke of the hard life on the ranch, the long days, and endless responsibilities. Clara shared her own experiences, growing up as a tall, strong girl in a small town, learning early how to help others and stand up for herself. They laughed at small memories, nodded in understanding at shared struggles, and found comfort in the quiet companionship. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing hour. Luke felt a deep sense of trust forming, something he had rarely allowed himself to feel. He realized that this was more than just physical care, it was emotional healing too. Clara's kindness, patience, and unwavering presence were helping him rebuild a part of himself he had long neglected. Eventually, the fire burned lower, casting a warm, amber glow over the cabin. Luke felt fatigue creeping back in. But it was a different kind of tired. Not the aching exhaustion of overwork, but the peaceful, comfortable weariness of being cared for and understood. Clara noticed and helped him settle into a chair with extra blankets, adjusting the fire to keep the room cozy. "You'll rest here tonight," she said gently. "I'll make sure you're comfortable. You need sleep to recover." Luke nodded, feeling a mix of relief and gratitude. He had spent so long running on his own, denying himself rest and care. Now, he could finally allow himself to be still, to accept the comfort that Clara offered. As he drifted toward sleep, he thought about the journey ahead. He knew he would still face challenges on the ranch, that the work was hard and unending. But he also knew he didn't have to face it alone. Clara's presence, her gentle care, and her unwavering support had opened a door he had long kept closed. In the quiet of the cabin, surrounded by warmth and soft light, Luke felt a sense of peace settle over him. He had asked for help, and in doing so, he had found something unexpected. Not just relief from his physical pain, but the beginnings of a deep connection with someone who truly cared. And for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to hope. Hope that life could be lighter, that burdens could be shared, and that the trust he had placed in Clara was the start of something meaningful. The night stretched on, calm and quiet, as Luke rested in the comfort of Clara's care. Outside, the prairie lay still under the stars, and inside, a quiet bond was forming, one built on trust, kindness, and the courage to be vulnerable. In that small cabin, under the gentle glow of the fire and the watchful care of the woman who had welcomed him, Luke realized something profound. That strength was not just about enduring hardships alone, but about allowing someone to stand with you, even in the quietest, simplest ways. The days that followed were quieter, yet somehow brighter. Luke found himself returning to Clara's cabin each evening, leaving the demands of the ranch behind for just a few hours of peace and care. The morning chores were still hard, and the sun still burned hot across the plains, but there was a new lightness in his step. He no longer felt the same constant ache in his chest, or the relentless fatigue that had weighed him down for weeks. Clara's presence seemed to carry a quiet healing, not just for his body, but for his spirit as well. Every evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with shades of pink and gold, Luke would ride slowly toward the edge of town, where Clara's cabin stood. Sometimes he brought small gifts from the ranch: a freshly baked loaf of bread, a basket of vegetables from the garden, or even a simple bouquet of wildflowers he picked along the trail. Clara would greet him with her calm, reassuring smile, always careful not to make him feel embarrassed or shy about needing help. They spent the evenings together in simple ways. Sometimes, they talked, swapping stories about the hardships and joys of their lives. Luke shared memories from his childhood on the ranch, the endless sun-soaked days, the livestock he had learned to care for, the lessons he had learned about life and resilience. Clara listened quietly, occasionally asking gentle questions that made him pause and think, and sometimes smile at long-forgotten moments. Other evenings were quieter, filled with small, domestic tasks. Clara would brew tea, while Luke chopped firewood or swept the cabin floor. They would laugh at small mishaps, a pot boiling over, a stubborn broom, or a spilled basket of herbs. There was something comforting about these ordinary moments, a sense that life could be simple and gentle when shared with someone who cared. Luke noticed how different it felt to let someone else take care of him. He had spent so many years relying solely on his own strength, convinced that needing help was a weakness. But Clara had shown him that accepting care didn't diminish his courage or resilience. In fact, it made him feel stronger, more grounded. He began to understand that being vulnerable could be an act of trust and bravery, not a sign of failure. One evening, as they sat together near the fire, Luke found himself speaking about things he had never shared with anyone. "I've always felt like I had to handle everything," he admitted, his voice quiet. "The ranch, the work, the responsibilities. I thought if I showed weakness, people would think less of me. I've been carrying this for so long, and I didn't realize how heavy it was until now." Clara nodded, her eyes full of understanding. "It's hard to carry so much on your own," she said softly. "But you don't have to. Life is easier when we share the burden. Strength isn't only about endurance. It's about knowing when to accept help. And you've been doing your best all these years." Her words resonated deeply with Luke. He felt a warmth in his chest, not just from the fire, but from the gentle honesty of Clara's voice. She didn't criticize or pity him. She simply recognized the truth he had been hiding from himself. He realized that he had been denying himself the comfort of companionship for far too long. As the nights passed, Luke and Clara's bond grew stronger. They shared more than just conversation and care. They shared understanding and trust. Luke began to notice small details about Clara that made him smile. The way her hands moved with confidence, yet gentleness. The steady warmth in her voice. The kindness that radiated from her even in the quietest moments. He admired her strength and independence. Yet he felt safe enough to let her guide him, to allow her to care for him without hesitation. Clara, too, began to notice Luke in new ways. She had always respected his resilience and dedication to the ranch. But now, she saw the softer side of him. The man who could admit when he needed help, who could laugh at small mistakes, who could listen with patience and care. She felt a quiet admiration for him, not because of his physical strength or accomplishments, but because of his willingness to open his heart, to be honest about his fears and limitations. One evening, after Luke had helped Clara with the chores, they settled by the fire with a cup of tea each. The cabin was warm and quiet, the firelight flickering across the walls. Luke stared into the flames for a moment, thinking about how different his life had become in just a few weeks. "I never thought I'd feel this way," he said, breaking the comfortable silence. "I didn't think I'd find someone I could trust like this." Clara smiled, a soft and understanding expression. "Sometimes, life surprises us," she said gently. "We meet people when we least expect it, and they help us see ourselves in ways we never imagined." Luke nodded, feeling the truth in her words. There was something in Clara's presence that made him feel understood in a way he had never experienced. He realized that he didn't just need her care for his body, he needed her companionship, her steady presence, and her unwavering trust. The following days continued in a similar rhythm, each evening strengthening the bond between them. Luke's health improved steadily. The cough that had plagued him for weeks became less frequent. The aches in his muscles faded, and the weight he had carried in his chest felt lighter. But more importantly, his spirit felt renewed. He felt a sense of belonging he hadn't known since childhood. A quiet joy in being able to share his life with someone who genuinely cared. One afternoon, as Luke was working on the ranch, he realized how much he had changed in just a few weeks. He moved with more energy, tackled tasks with renewed focus, and even smiled at moments that previously would have gone unnoticed. He thought about Clara and how her care had helped him recover, not just physically, but emotionally. He understood that her support had given him more than comfort. It had given him hope, confidence, and a renewed sense of purpose. That evening, when he rode to Clara's cabin, he carried not just the gifts of bread and herbs but a sense of gratitude that words could hardly capture. He found her tending the small garden outside the cabin, her tall frame bending gracefully as she worked. She looked up as he approached, her face lighting up with a warm smile. "Evening, Luke," she said, setting down a small basket of vegetables. "How was your day?" "Better than I expected," he replied, dismounting and brushing the dust from his coat. "I've been thinking about everything. About life, work, and about trust. I didn't realize how much I needed. This needed someone like you." Clara's eyes softened, and she stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. "You've been carrying so much for so long," she said. "It's good that you're letting yourself rest, that you're letting yourself be cared for." Luke felt a lump in his throat, a mix of emotion he hadn't felt in years. He wanted to say more, to explain how much her presence meant to him, but the words seemed too heavy. Instead, he simply nodded, allowing the silence to carry the meaning. Clara understood, as she always did, and squeezed his arm gently in reassurance. As the evening wore on, they moved inside the cabin. Luke helped with small chores, and they shared a simple meal together. The fire crackled, the cabin warm and comforting, and the bond between them grew stronger with every shared moment. Luke realized that the trust and companionship he had begun to feel were no longer fragile. They were solidifying into something real, something that would sustain him in ways he had never imagined. Late that night, as Luke settled into a comfortable chair by the fire, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. Just a few weeks ago, he had been exhausted, ill, and unsure if he could continue carrying the burdens of life alone. Now, he felt renewed, both in body and in spirit. Clara's care, patience, and unwavering presence had shown him that it was possible to be strong and still accept help, to be resilient and still allow himself to be vulnerable. He realized that the connection he shared with Clara was rare and precious. It wasn't built on grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but on quiet moments of understanding, simple acts of care, and the courage to trust another person. And as he drifted toward sleep, the warmth of the fire and the gentle presence of Clara nearby wrapped around him like a soft blanket, comforting and safe. Luke knew that life would still have its challenges, that the ranch would demand long hours and hard work, and that not every day would be easy. But for the first time in a long while, he felt confident that he wouldn't have to face those challenges alone. Clara's steady care and unwavering companionship had given him the courage to open his heart, to accept love and trust, and to find strength not just in himself, but in the bond they shared. Outside, the prairie lay silent under the stars, a vast expanse of calm and beauty. Inside the cabin, two people sat together, sharing warmth, trust, and the quiet joy of companionship. And in that shared space, Luke realized something profound. That healing wasn't just about the body, and strength wasn't just about endurance. True healing and true strength came from allowing oneself to be seen, to be cared for, and to be trusted. And in that moment, with the fire casting its soft glow and Clara's gentle presence by his side, Luke felt the beginnings of a connection that would shape the rest of his life. A connection built on trust, understanding, and the courage to open one's heart. The days had grown shorter, and the chill of early autumn began to touch the prairie. Luke noticed the shift in the air as he worked on the ranch, the golden grass swaying beneath the wind that carried a hint of frost. He had returned to the ranch fully recovered, his strength renewed, his body no longer weighed down by illness. But more importantly, his heart felt lighter, filled with a quiet sense of belonging he had never experienced before. Clara's presence had become a part of his life, a comforting constant that he realized he could no longer imagine living without. That evening, Luke rode slowly toward Clara's cabin, the sun sinking behind the hills and painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. He carried with him a basket of fresh apples from the orchard, a small token of appreciation for everything Clara had done for him. But underneath that simple gift was something more, a desire to express feelings he had never allowed himself to feel so openly. When he arrived at the cabin, Clara was in the garden, tending to the late-blooming flowers. She looked up as he approached, her tall frame silhouetted against the fading sunlight. Her smile was warm and welcoming, as if she had been expecting him. "Evening, Luke," she called, brushing her hands on her apron. "The air is getting colder. You'll catch a chill if you stay outside too long." "I've got something for you," Luke said, setting the basket of apples down on the table near the cabin door. "Just a small gift, for everything you've done for me." Clara looked at the basket, then back at Luke, her eyes soft and gentle. "You didn't have to," she said quietly. "Your company is more than enough." Luke shook his head, smiling faintly. "It's not enough just to sit here quietly anymore. I need to say something. Something I've been feeling for a while, but I didn't know how to put it into words." Clara tilted her head slightly, her expression patient and understanding. She didn't press, didn't rush him. She simply waited, giving him the space he needed to speak his heart. Luke took a deep breath, the cool air filling his lungs. "Clara, these past weeks, you've done more for me than I can ever explain. You've cared for me, helped me heal, and you've shown me what it feels like to be trusted and accepted. I never thought I'd feel this way. But I can't imagine my life without you anymore." Clara's eyes softened, and she stepped closer, placing her hand gently on his arm. "Luke, I feel the same," she said quietly. "You've been honest and brave in ways that I admire. Your heart, it's been open to me, and I've seen the strength and kindness in you. I care for you, more than I can easily say." Luke's chest tightened with emotion. The words he had held inside for so long were finally spoken, and in that moment, the fear of vulnerability melted away. He reached out and took Clara's hand in his, feeling the warmth and reassurance that had always drawn him to her. I want to be with you," he said, his voice steady despite the emotions he felt. "Not just for a few evenings, but for the rest of whatever time we have. I want us to face life together, to share the burdens and joys alike." Clara's smile deepened, her eyes shining in the soft glow of the setting sun. "I want that too, Luke," she replied. "We've both faced hardships and challenges alone for so long. But together, I think we can make life lighter, happier, and full of trust." They stood there for a moment, simply holding hands, feeling the quiet comfort of their connection. The prairie stretched endlessly behind them, the wind whispering through the grass, carrying with it a sense of calm and peace. For the first time, Luke felt the weight of loneliness lift completely. He was no longer facing life alone. He had Clara by his side, a partner in every sense of the word. That night, they shared a simple meal inside the cabin. The fire crackled warmly, filling the small space with a golden glow. They laughed over small stories from their past, shared dreams for the future, and enjoyed the quiet companionship that had grown between them. Luke realized that this connection wasn't built on grand gestures or dramatic events, but on everyday acts of care, trust, and understanding. And in that realization, he found a deep sense of peace. After the meal, Clara moved to prepare a warm tea, while Luke settled into the chair he had come to love near the fire. He watched her move with calm confidence, noticing the way her hands worked efficiently but gently, and the quiet determination in her eyes. He felt a swell of gratitude and affection, knowing that he had found someone rare and extraordinary, someone who could see his strength and vulnerability at the same time, and love him for it. When the tea was ready, Clara handed him a cup, and sat down beside him. The warmth of the drink seeped into his hands, but it was the warmth of Clara's presence that filled him completely. They talked quietly, sharing their thoughts and feelings in a way that felt natural and easy. Luke realized that he could finally speak his heart openly, without fear or hesitation, and Clara would listen with understanding and care. As the night deepened, Luke felt a sense of readiness, a courage that had been growing steadily over the weeks. He looked at Clara and spoke softly, his words sincere and honest. "Clara, I know we've spent time together healing, laughing, and talking, but I want to take the next step with you. I want us to be a part of each other's lives, to face everything together. I want you to know that I trust you completely, and I want to share my life with you." Clara reached out, cupping his face gently with both hands. "Luke, I trust you too," she whispered. "And I want the same. We've both been strong alone, but together, we'll be stronger. We'll be a team, through everything." In that quiet cabin, with the fire casting flickering shadows across the walls, they shared their first real, deep embrace. Luke felt the comfort, safety, and warmth of Clara's arms around him. And in that embrace, he understood the meaning of trust, love, and companionship. Clara's embrace was not just a gesture of affection, it was a promise, a reassurance that they would face life together, supporting each other through every challenge. Time seemed to slow as they stood there, holding each other, feeling the strength and warmth that came from mutual care and understanding. The world outside the cabin faded away, leaving only the quiet intimacy of two hearts finding each other in a vast, often harsh world. Luke realized that this moment was the culmination of weeks of shared experiences, care, and trust. It was the beginning of a partnership built on honesty, support, and love. As the fire burned low, they settled near it, still holding hands and sharing quiet conversation. Luke felt a deep sense of gratitude for everything Clara had done for him, and for the bond they had built together. He understood that life would still bring challenges, the ranch would still demand hard work, the seasons would still change, and unexpected difficulties would arise. But with Clara by his side, he felt ready to face anything. Over the next few weeks, their connection continued to grow. They worked side by side on the ranch, shared meals and quiet evenings, and supported each other in small, meaningful ways. Luke found joy in the simple routines of life, with Clara chopping firewood together, tending the garden, and sitting quietly by the fire as the prairie stretched endlessly beyond the cabin. Each day, he felt his heart grow fuller, his trust deepen, and his sense of companionship strengthen. Clara's presence was a constant reassurance, a reminder that even in a world filled with hardship, there could be love, care, and connection. Luke realized that the journey he had begun weeks ago, seeking help, opening his heart, and allowing himself to be vulnerable, had led him to a place of profound happiness. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills, Luke and Clara sat outside the cabin, watching the sky turn shades of gold and crimson. Luke reached for Clara's hand, holding it gently in his own. "I never thought I'd find someone like you," he said quietly. "Someone who sees me, trusts me, and cares for me. But now that I have, I can't imagine life any other way." Clara smiled, squeezing his hand. "And I never imagined I'd find someone like you," she replied softly. "But here we are, together, and that's all that matters." They sat in comfortable silence, the wind whispering through the grass, the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Luke felt a sense of completion, of peace, and of hope. He had found someone who accepted him fully, who cared for him deeply, and who would face life's challenges with him, side by side. In that quiet moment, Luke understood that true strength was not measured by independence alone, but by the courage to trust, to care, and to love. And Clara, with her steady presence and gentle heart, had shown him exactly what that meant. As night fully settled over the prairie, Luke and Clara returned to the cabin, where the fire still glowed warmly. They prepared a simple meal together, shared quiet conversation, and finally settled near the fire, wrapped in blankets and each other's presence. Luke felt the weight of the past weeks lift completely, replaced by a sense of hope, love, and connection. For the first time in his life, he felt whole. He had faced his vulnerabilities, opened his heart, and found someone who would walk beside him through every trial and joy. And as he drifted to sleep that night, with Clara's hand resting in his, Luke knew that this was only the beginning of a life filled with trust, care, and love. A life they would share together, come what may.